Greetings and salutations. It's another episode of the Geek Out. And it's been a hot minute and a lot of things to go through and talk about, but there's a reason why we've been stalling out on actually putting out any content. We are working steadily on getting our YouTube product ready to go, and will be coming up very soon. So you'll be seeing and hearing from us very soon as far as the real pundits go. And to start this off, I have watched a lot of stuff since the last Geek Out and been trying to implement some of that into our normal show. Some things win, some things don't. So that gives me the chance to go through and talk about some of these things here. First off, caught a lot of trailers recently. And of course, with the Super Bowl, you get a plethora of new trailers, and some of them didn't work for me and some of them did. To quickly go over the trailers that really got me going right now, because I want to talk about that. The Hobbs and Shaw Fast and the Furious connected trailer, that really worked. Well, Eldris Elba, that definitely is a fanboy situation there. He's just BA. Whenever he's a bad guy, this goes all the way back to Luther, which really is one of those questionable, really good guy or bad guy. And if you've never watched Luther, definitely a good thing to jump on the BBC to talk about. But the Hobbs and Shaw trailer, that just resonated really well. I think our time period for Fast and the Furious movies is a little bit past us now, especially to have a little spin-off. I think that time period is kind of done to make it Fast and the Furious, Hobbs and Shaw. I think if they just left it be as Hobbs and Shaw, I think that would have been a great little movie. You don't really have to nod back to, we have to take cars and drive them underneath trailers. Not really needed at this point, not after everything we've seen. But a silly action film, I think it's definitely time. I'm going to jump to my number 3 thing I want to talk about, because I'm really trying to avoid my number 2, because I have a funny feeling that some people are going to be, oh, boo. So we're going to lead up to that. Battle Angel Attila, or Altia. Love the manga. That one was really great concept. And from all their pre-reviews of other film people already getting a chance to see it, other reviewers, some people hate it, some people love it. Now, before I get a chance to go through and see it, I at least want to make one huge statement for anyone who is going to go see it, and I recommend that you do. Of course, make your own judgment, and that's what we're doing right now. The thing about when you take an anime to live action, it has to be a visual spectacle, because those of us who are just knighted in the realm of anime, we know it's going to be over the top. You're going to see things that you would never really think could be seen, so give those to me. Don't try to hold back and make them a little bit more visually comprehensive. I want things that you can't see. I want the ability of traditional animation with a decent storyline that maybe in our society right now we cannot actually handle. But that's kind of just the point of watching a live action anime. Sometimes they do it really well and sometimes they don't. I think this one, especially with who all is involved, Robert Rodriguez is known for taking comic books or anime titles or manga titles and turning them into something visually appealing. Hint in Sin City. Almost perfect rendition. Like, I think that of all people, Robert Rodriguez being involved, he's going to at least keep it close to the actual manga. Now, that's a lot of manga to try to smash into 2 hours. I don't think it can be done, but that's where some people are saying it's slacking and it doesn't have a gripping story. They were trying to compare it to, was it Ghost in the Shell? Which, Ghost in the Shell wasn't that great. All it did was kind of highlight on some things here and there, and then it gave me the true anime feel. So, right now, anybody comparing anything to Ghost in the Shell you're just wrong. So, that's just my personal opinion, because you'd really have to know anime and watch all of the Ghost in the Shell properties to really understand what they were trying to go for. We can get past all the, quote, whitewashing. I'll let that go. The character is an android, whatever. Just tell your story. If you make your story believable and I'm enjoying myself during this ride, I let it go. There's going to be some changes, because taking one format to another is always going to be a challenge. Plus, you have to deal with Hollywood. Next thing up. Now, I start this off with, I love Jordan Peele. As a comedian, meh. As a filmmaker, oh man, love this guy. Now that I'm done riding, him doing the Twilight Zone, it's cool that he wants to bring that forward, but I think there are some things that should be left in the past. Maybe repackage them, remaster them. Always talk about take these classics, remaster them, and bring them to a new audience. I don't want to see, first of all, if it's not in black and white, I don't want to see it. Number two, I really don't think unless you're going to retell the stories that were already told in the Twilight Zone, that it really would work in this time period, this day and age. It could, and I don't want to see it going more towards more horror based. It wasn't supposed to be a gore fest. It's supposed to be a cerebral thing, and that is where that's going. So, Jordan Peele, love you as a filmmaker. And that's my biggest thing. Love you as a filmmaker. Don't know if I'm going to actually follow through on the whole Twilight Zone thing, but I'm definitely not going to be doing it due to the fact of it's on the CBS streaming, which is the bane of my existence right now, which comes into the whole thing of didn't really get into the new Star Trek Discovery because it's on CBS streaming and I refuse to pay for, not streaming, I have no problem paying for streaming. I just refuse to pay for CBS streaming. Just the content isn't really pushing it for me. Some people may disagree. Some people may, hey, this is the greatest thing ever. I just don't think it's going to be worthy of me paying a monthly subscription to see Twilight Zone episodes that really won't have the same nostalgia of the black and white episodes. That's just my opinion, but hey, that's the whole thing. Critic, my opinion. Now, being that I'm going into this whole critic thing, I have to get into something that's probably going to give me a little bit of hate. And I really don't feel like getting into anything non-positive, but I think that being honest about what I'm feeling should be at least out there. I'm not feeling Captain Marvel. A lot of it comes through of knowing the comic book lore and seeing how far they're willing to stretch and push just to get this character out there. I really don't think we're not set up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to really have her there. And if you're going to tell her story, you're going to need more than just an out-of-nowhere Captain Marvel movie. I personally felt like we should have had a little bit of a glimpse of her and then get a foundation movie. Give us a little bit more of a background. Have her have been maybe an Avenger beforehand. I don't know. But there are some things that they could have done with the property instead of just slapping us with Captain Marvel, which, of course, I know we're getting into a new phase of the Marvel MCU, or the Marvel MCU, that's actually right. The new Marvel Cinematic Universe. I have to make sure I say it all the way. I just don't think they're doing this one justice. I'm just not liking the character of Captain Marvel. In the comic books, followed her through and through. Thought it was one of the greatest bridges from the cosmic level superheroes to the Earth base. It was a good tie-in, but I think there's too much lore that goes along with her to just skimp out on who she really is and how much she's interacted with the rest of Earth, unless they're going to go through and explain that in a quick flashback, which I think does no justice. That I think we need to get into a different way of doing our movies, but they're really pushing this one hard, and I'm just personally not feeling it. And as a comic book fan, I really think that I should be one of the first people out there going, hey, this is the next phase. I should be amped up for it. I don't think that the comic book movie genre is dead. I just think that it's definitely time to reevaluate. The same way Star Wars is reevaluating. And I'm going to actually get into that today. It's an amazing thing. Now, this is really what I wanted to get on here to talk about today. It's an amazing thing when you're watching a normal TV show and something finally clicks in your head. Now, I was watching, which has nothing to do with geeking out, which is, I guess, just one of those things where you're watching something non-geeky and they say something and it just triggers. I'm watching this TV show called This Is Us. Really good show. I'm enjoying how the story works. I'm enjoying how the direction and how the editing works, because you have three different timelines, or several different timelines. They're all lining up with each other. There's really two, but then there's another point of view of certain things, of certain characters. but it's a really interesting show, and they're shooting it in a very intriguing way, and I'm all for that. But as I was watching not the most recent in the that's currently live, but my current most recent, because I'm watching it very slowly, I'm not binging this. There was a scene where a character ends up making a Star Wars quote, referencing his own life, and it snapped to me why all of a sudden I feel the way I feel about the new trilogy. Now, we're getting into a new year of films, which we know at the end of this year, we're going to get our last of the Skywalker line movies of Star Wars. Cool. And I've fought tooth and nail and been trying to keep my own composure about whether or not if I'm going to say, hey, am I going to watch it in the theater or not? Because last time I said anything was, I'm not going to watch it in the theater. But I didn't have a strong enough reason why. It just didn't feel right. And it's true. There's something about the new series that's just not pulling me. And this quote from This Is Us is where I had that moment that, oh, I got it now. That's the real reason. So I'm going to read off this quote. And this character is trying to describe how it is to be on the outside of a family. He states, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Star Wars. I loved that it was a huge story with a bunch of people coming together to fight these gigantic wars. But when you break it down, it's really about a few people on the inside who know what's up. Luke, Vader, Leia, Obi-Wan, they were on the inside. They were having lightsaber battles on bridges. They were talking about big stuff, and everybody else was pretty much Chewbacca, which I kind of took that line and was like, no, Chewbacca was in the main crew. But it brought up this moment that I had. This, I got it now. That was what I was talking about. And whenever you go through and you look at some of the other properties that have come out within the Star Wars realm, I don't even want to say, because some of it's, well, all of it that I'm talking about right now is all canon, because now I can actually take my own words back. So everything that's currently within canon, Rebels, Resistance, these are shows, and the original movies were about this crew, this gathering of this team. Rather, they had to go off and do something off on the side real quick, but everybody was all about just this team and their journey through the galaxy and what they've been doing. We saw that same repetition style with different characters, different ideas happen in Rebels. So it's not that hardcore fans have an issue with Rey being what she is, which I have some theories on that, and if they ever come true, then cool. It was a big lead up to nothing. But we had a team. In Rebels, we had a team. They were a little micro family. Everybody dealt with each other. They had their good days, their bad days. When somebody got in trouble, they all got in trouble. They were risking life and limb to save one person, in the same process having to go back and save the other person. When it ended, you felt exhausted on Rebels because you're like, this is the end of the story. And you almost didn't want it to end, but you knew that this was the ending of the story. The current Star Wars movies, 7, 8, and soon to be 9, just, they're missing that family. I'm not talking about that family-friendly fun. No, I'm talking about that concept of, you know they're going to get back together in about 5 minutes. With this one, you have these characters who are almost bonded as people who would know each other and would be maybe considered friends, and we keep on stretching them very far away from each other. Each one has their own storyline, and then they get teamed up with somebody else who has a storyline, and that story is going one direction, and then this story is going a different way, which is starting to make me feel a couple of things. One, it's not a beef against Kathleen Kennedy, it's not a beef against Rian Johnson, it's beef against storytellers. And I think that all storytellers need to up their game, especially in, now I'm calling it a microvision that we're dealing with. What I mean by the microvision, we're talking about taking a very large story. Even if you have 3 movies, it gives you maybe 6 hours to tell your story. Now we're in a world where we have these streaming outlets that give us 12 episodes, 14 episodes, some even more than that, to tell an entire story. So you're no longer hamstringed by going, I have to contain this within 2 hours, because as we've seen, no one's really making movies like 3 hours long. There is no Dr. Zhivago of our time period where you're in the movies for hours. The last time we had anything that really pressed, to my knowledge, in theaters that did well, there's the addendum of and does well, were The Lord of the Rings. There you got movies that were epically long, but even within that range, they were still shortened for the general viewing public, because I'm guessing in nowadays you need to be able to hold people's attention for about 90 minutes. Anything more than that hardcore, you have to have a hardcore fan base in there to make it work. So because we're not doing epically long movies in the theater anymore, now we're getting those same things in our streaming, which now our streaming, if you look at it from that point, you can tell a story, and that's our long story that you can develop. Movies are the short version, they're the micro visionary work, which is kind of sad, because at one time it was the exact opposite. We're evolving as a film going culture, because not all films now are based off of, hey, did you see it in the theater? Now we're, hey, did you see it in general, whether it be Netflix or Hulu or whatever the case may be. But my point of all this is, I finally figured out what triggered me about Star Wars. And it leads into a lot of other thoughts and process, like, could 7, 8, and 9 been better off as some type of streaming situation? Would my hatred come up so strongly if we got a chance to expand on, okay, if we're going to follow one person's story, let's finish up their story and let's get them back to the group. There are people that are in our new group that have only known each other for maybe 5-10 minutes. And so getting everybody back together to do one big hurrah in episode 9. Love J.J. Abrams. You always have some really unique visionary work. But I'm still on the fence on whether or not I'm going to the theater. And of course, the fanboy in me is like, how are you not going to go in the theaters? So I'm not going to go back on my word. But I think it's time to take a look at how we do our entertainment as of right now. If you're going to try to replicate something that worked in the past, then you really need to look at your current project and mimic not the exact story, but what was it that actually worked. And you can't let your ego or your own personal vision remove you from what the original content was. Which is pretty much all I have to say about Star Wars. I'm still on the fence. I'll probably decide at the very beginning of December if I'm going to cave and go see Episode 9. I don't think it's going to happen. I may get duped into it. I may fall into a trap. J.J. Abrams may put out a trailer that makes me go, okay, you got me. But where we're sitting at right now, I don't see that happening, which is really sad, because I am still a huge Star Wars fanboy. Nothing has really stopped for me is when it comes to Star Wars. Resistance, Rebels, anything like that, I'm all for. Which leads me to my last point of this show, is animated seems to be the way to go. We've seen this work in so many ways, and it's not just because it's episodic and you still get those same feels. You get better content that seems to stay closer to the original. Now, where I'm coming from on this isn't just talking about Star Wars Rebels. I recently got back into Young Justice, one of my favorite DC animated features. And it was just perfect. So perfect that I'm going to actually have to do a separate episode just to talk about Young Justice, which alone by itself, DC streaming, worth the money to me, at least, just with everything that you get. That's no payment to me, of course, because we're not getting money based off of this, but it was worth the money. Now, what was not worth the money was Titans, which is where I'm starting to get into that whole thing of, wow, it's amazing that Young Justice held me through all of the episodes that are currently out. And Titans, I'm slowly getting through it. They're not doing well on that whole situation for me. I enjoy the adult versions of the characters. I think they did a really good job as far as casting and getting the right moods for the different characters. I just don't see it coming together the way I would enjoy it. I feel like there is a part of the story that's missing. The Dick Grayson time period before he got to where he was at, I think is where I'm missing out. So that basically is my whole geek out episode. The only other thing that I'm going to say that's geeky that I've recently done is where I have to. This is actually connected to some cartoonage here or animated. So I recently picked up Orville, and I feel like it's sad that I'm late to the party on that one. I cannot believe that because during that same time period, Orville first came out. It was a situation of watch Orville and think that, this is going to be a Family Guy version of Star Trek, which I was like, I'll pass. Or watch Star Trek Discovery. I chose Star Trek Discovery. I chose poorly. I watched Orville and I actually went through and just binged watched all the way up to the most current part of this new season. And it was a quick binge. I did not stop doing anything else other than watching Orville because it felt like Star Trek, which this connects back to what I was talking about before. If you know a formula works and you feel like, hey, we can replicate this, remember what it is that you're trying to replicate. It's not the story, it's a feeling. And Orville feels like episodes of Star Trek, the Next Generation, that were just not aired. Now, a little bit more silly, a little more humor involved than your normal everyday Star Trek episode. But it feels like Star Trek, which is wildly amazing that I'm going, this is just as enjoyable as watching TNG or Deep Space Nine. Just it brings back that whole this feels right, and I can enjoy watching this. I actually have shared this with other people, and I feel bad as a geek. You going, yes, I support geekdom in all facets, and you go like, oh, I passed on Orville, and come to find out that Orville was dead on. I mean, that definitely sits in geekhood, and Seth MacFarlane, man, you knocked it out the park. I was not expecting that. A little bit of your crude style humor, but I let it go. But I'm impressed. And so I'm definitely going to be getting, some Orville swag coming up on adding on to the backpack type of situation because it's definitely worth it. And I hope to see them do many more seasons than where we're sitting at right now. But the real of everything, where are we really at right now as far as the Geek Out and the real pundits, got to speak real just for a second before we do my whole sign off of where are we going as far as this upcoming week. We've been running into some schedule conflicts. We've been running some technical conflicts. We've been trying to get this YouTube like live action and you can see us type of thing going on. This was just me jumping on here because I miss talking and hopefully, hit somebody's ears up and have them listen to me talk for about 30 minutes about something. And we're trying to get a little bit of our name out there. We're trying to get some buzz out there. We've spent almost to the date a year doing this in some form or fashion, whether it's Geek Out or me taking over the Real Pundits actual show and having a Geek Out moment. We're trying to get heard. And that really comes from the people who are listening. So if you're taking a listen to us, even, I'm going to have to give a shout out to our one listener out in Spain. Props to you. But if you know somebody and you like what you're hearing here right now, or I say something that you're like, I really should comment on that. Even if it's, something that you have to say against what we're saying, even though we try to keep the geek out, or at least I do, try to keep the geek out about positivity, or at least enlightening people on certain things within the geek culture. Maybe it's time to share that with a friend. Everybody knows another geek who could share it to another geek and do this old school commercial thing who shares it with another friend and get us out there, because the only way we're going to actually be able to make this bigger and add in more content and more direction and even get better on YouTube is by having people respond and listen in. So the homework for this week, like we used to do on the old school Real Pundits, the beginning of this whole year of craziness that we've gone through. Tell somebody about the Real Pundits. Tell somebody about the Geek Out. Heck, you can just tell them about the Geek Out. Yeah, listen up for that one, Brandon. But for real, holla at us. You can always email us up at mailbag, therealpundits.com, and that is mailbag at therealpundits.com. And of course, if you've been listening this long, you know that the real is spelled REEL. And of course, if you have any comments about the Geek Out, by all means, hit me up at ANA Real Pundit on Twitter. And you can say whatever you need to say to me about anything I have to talk about. And maybe I'll take what you were talking about and take it to the dome and speak about it on the next episode. Which, to give you a hint up on the next episode, is probably going to be a whole lot of Young Justice. And if you've not seen that, I'm going to give you a recap. Now, of course, Brandon and I are leading everything up to very soon. Our show is going to take a very different direction. Not different as in that we're not going to be talking about movies. We're just going to be talking about how cold it gets when winter is coming. Even though some of you right now are probably knowing exactly how cold it gets when winter is coming or winter is here. So, our next episode of The Real Pundits, we're going to be talking about another Marvel movie. So I feel like I'm infecting the Real Pundits. We're going to be talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp. He has some views on it. I have some views on it. And I'd like to see exactly where we're going to have difference at. So, on that note, keep it geeky. Be nice to each other. Remember, this is all about opinions and spreading positivity in the geek culture. So, share some positivity. Tell me about your day. Tell me something geeky that you've seen and hit me up. And as always, bye.